morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, having a great week so far. Welcome. Thank you for coming to campus to come hear us out today. Just as a reminder, the four of us, we're all here, high school counselors at KIS. I hope everyone knows who their students' counselor is by now. But if you're not too sure, please come and check us out afterwards. And we're going to just go right into it.
You want me to jump in?
Yeah.
Okay. It's really good to see you, especially for some of you parents that have been on this journey since 9th grade. This is my first group that I've been with all 4 years, and it's really amazing that they're already seniors and applying to college and getting ready for that next chapter of their lives. It's really, really special. And I'm very much looking forward to this experience, and hopefully you are as well. A big part of these conversations that we have with you is to try to give you information to hopefully reassure you so that you kind of have some expectations about what's coming up. So we'll look at kind of the next 3 months, the next 6 months, what to expect in the second semester as decisions are coming out, what the responsibilities and roles of everybody are, and how you can best support your child through this really, really special time. I really can't see that, can we?
I know.
So this will just give you a sense of kind of what the next few months looks like. So right now, as we're coming back, it's kind of a whirlwind time for everybody, for your children, for the teachers, but for seniors especially, they have a lot on their plate. And so I would say before we even kind of look at the timeline, just how are you helping support that, right? Making sure that they are managing their deadlines, that they have good organizational skills, that there's maybe a family calendar of important dates, all of those things that you can help support them as they move forward, because there is a lot that happens at this time of the year, and it will go by really, really fast. So right now we are working with them to update their Common App from the summer, any activities they've had, making sure that they're kind of adding those last minute details, double checking the Common App. And that's a piece that they should be working through both independently at home with you, making sure they have all their information there, and then working with their counselors to make sure those things are updated. We will be meeting with them again, I believe it's next week, to go over that. They should also be finalizing any research into universities. So this is a really important thing that we had talked about last year, and hopefully they were doing a lot of thinking, having conversations with you about the right fit for them, and kind of looking into where they're going and what they need to be preparing for those applications. We've got the SAT this weekend. I know many of your children are done with the SAT, but for those that are taking it, good luck to them. Then as we move into September, we're really focused on kind of finalizing those pieces. So writing the essays, especially the supplementary essays. All of your children's universities should at this point have provided what their updated supplementary essays are. And I think this year in particular, we've seen a lot of changes to those supplementary essays in the past. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's a piece that they could be working on right now. And then the college list, which will be due on September 15th. So again, we've got a few weeks until that college list is due. As we've talked individually with you and as a group, their list can still be updated throughout the semester, but we want to make sure that as much as possible that they've kind of done that research, know where they're applying, and are really working at finalizing those college applications, not starting them at that point and not kind of restarting throughout the semester. As we get into October, we have the first deadlines. So when we're thinking about trying to submit early, we're thinking about that November 1st deadline. We're asking students to try to be 2 weeks ahead. And so October 15th is going to be a really, really important date. So as we get into the beginning of October, are they working towards finalizing that? So they're not doing that last minute work, which we know leads to mistakes and errors and missed things, all the little things that can hurt them in the application process. We want to make sure they're kind of working ahead. And if it doesn't feel like they're going to be ready for that deadline, then really kind of looking at reevaluating their list and when are they applying, what application deadlines they're working towards. We've also just wanted to point out that there is a October 7th SAT. However, that will not be offered at KIS this year. And so if that was something that somebody was looking into, they should be looking for alternative sites if that was going to be a priority for their application.
Moving into November. Do you have?
Yeah. No, it's there.
Oh,
Is there?
sorry, slower. Moving into November, we're going to talk more about those deadlines. You guys have those papers in your hands. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But by November, those early applications should be well finished and submitted and kind of in the rear view. And for students who will be applying to the University of California system, that's an important deadline in November. The university's deadline is at that November 30th, and that means the KIS recommendation would be mid-November that they submit those. And this is also a time where students are really digging into the majority of their applications. Typically, students do a small number of early, and the majority of their applications would be regular decision that they're thinking about. And that is where, as parents, I would really recommend to make a note to offer more support during that time. Because as they're working on many different supplements and the essays and really finalizing their list, this is a time where students can start to feel quite overwhelmed. Also in the school year, November is more than halfway through the semester, so students will be seeing bigger projects and bigger assessments. So as parents, November can be a very long and grueling month, so please do provide some extra support and assistance to your kids during that month.
I just wanted to add, we had a bunch of former KIS alumni come in earlier this week to talk to all the seniors to kind of talk about their own experiences. And one of the things that they were talking about was the essay writing process, and that more time isn't always better, and really thinking about their frame of mind. And so one of the students was talking about, he'd be working for an hour or two, and the essay wasn't getting better. And so he started getting in the habit of going on walks. And so he'd get up, he'd go outside, he'd move around, and he'd be thinking about his essay, but he's not just staring at the screen and just editing and re-editing and re-editing. And I thought that was really, really good advice. And so while you were kind of like guiding your children and trying to help them as well, that more time thrown at it isn't always the most efficient way to do it. And the students all kind of spoke to how important it was for their kind of own frame of mind that they were in that led to their best essays. And so whatever that looks like for your children, I think you all probably have really good insight to when they are the calmest, when they're the happiest, when they are the best version of themselves, that is probably a time to maximize when they're working on the essay. And if they're having a bad day, if they're tired, and again, there's going to be so many deadlines, but making sure that they are also taking time for themselves as well will lead to better results.
Then looking into December, if your children are submitting applications for regular decision during the winter break or January 1st, all of their applications we would recommend that they submit them before the winter break so that we can send all of the documents. So there is on that chart that you have a date that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. Also, your children should not be taking the SAT, but it is an option in December if they feel like that's important. If your child is thinking about that, we really encourage them to come in and chat with us so we can help them make good use of their time. Sometimes more is not always better. Also in December, for students who applied early decision, they will start getting their early decision results back, which is a really interesting time around school. Some kids are so full of joy at their decisions, and some students are very, very sad with their decisions. And the same thing will be happening at your house as well. So just making sure when your children are receiving those decisions that you are there with them to talk it through. We always try to encourage students to have the idea that college decisions are not personal. They're made by an admissions team who are doing the best that they can during that time, but it's not a perfect system, definitely not. And so those college decisions are not personal. Help your child grieve and then help them move on from that if they get denied, and of course help them celebrate when they get accepted.
There are two really bad strategies that sometimes come into play when we're looking at those early deadlines and what to do come December 15th, 16th, whenever those decisions come out. The first one is the student is like, oh, I really feel like I'm going to get into that school, and so I don't need to spend all this extra time on these other 10 applications, and I'll wait, and I've got 3 weeks over December break. But working over December break is not a great time. They've gone through an entire semester. Some of their friends have just gotten into university. Some of their friends are traveling. It's cold, it's dark. It is not a good time to be writing essays, and especially if they just got denied from that dream school. And that's the mindset that they're going to go into with how they're writing their applications. And they're usually writing from a place of doubt and insecurity. The other kind of attached to that is the idea of, well, I want to wait and see what happens with my early decisions, and then I'll decide where I want to apply with the other 5, 6, 7, 8 schools. And again, this process, there's so many different pieces, and there is a human element, and there's all these pieces that we won't know. We won't always know why we didn't get in, or did get in, or got waitlisted, or deferred. But a young person will make a lot of assumptions, and they will sometimes then overreact in how they make decisions for the next school that they apply to. And again, we want to be doing all of this from a real good place where they're positive and they're confident and they're feeling supported. And so if any of those discussions are happening at your house, get rid of them now. Like, let's have a good plan going into the year. Let's follow through. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but we want to make sure we kind of have a good plan to kind of ride out all of those things.
Can I add a little bit onto that is that sometimes when a student gets one of those rejections at that dream school, suddenly they want to change their whole entire college list because they've gone into panic mode. So as you're building that list with your child, make sure it's a real thought out list where, okay, you didn't get into the dream school, but now you've got all these other fantastic schools that you're really excited about, so that that one rejection doesn't blow up the plan that you guys have been building over the last year, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus years.
Your children are all going to be fine. They're great kids. They really are. I was just talking to a middle school teacher of mine who last night we were having dinner, and he was saying that this was his favorite class. He still remembers them from 7th grade, and we were just talking about the students, and I certainly feel the same way. They're all going to be fine. There's going to be stressful times. There's going to be some disappointment, but they are going to be okay.
I think this is probably a chart that many of you have seen before. We rely on it quite heavily in our department, as it is, it comes from colleges directly, as most of our information does, but this comes in a nice little chart. This has been last updated in 2019, so we do just want to say that, and we also want to point out 2019 is pre-COVID. Many, many universities have made changes in some of their priorities since 2019, but this survey has been done again, but the organization is releasing the information in 2023, and as of yesterday, they hadn't released it yet. So for now, we are looking at 2019, assuming that most of it is mostly the same. There are some changes and there are some things to consider, but we really do want to get your help in reminding your students of the things that universities are finding most important, because we're seeking your help in helping your students stay on track with their time. Students feel a lot of pull on their time. They have many, many interests and many things that they would like to do. But we can't do all of those things at a very, very high level. More things are not always better. So the number one thing that I'd like you to take away from this slide is number one. The most important factor to the most universities in the US are their grades in their college prep courses. And I do want to note that that doesn't say GPA as the one final number, but the actual grades in the courses. Each of those is very important individually. They do not look just at that final GPA number. They want to see how they're doing in each of those courses over the semester, over the year, and over their 4 years in high school. So if your students are ever at a point where you know that they have a very long list of things to do and they need some help prioritizing, please take a walk with them and then help them refocus on the grades in their courses. That should always be the number one focus. College prep would really be like the graduation requirements, AP courses for sure, but just their
Core classes.
core classes in those core subjects.
Yeah.
The other things are things that we don't necessarily have control over. The strength of the curriculum, that comes from KIS. SAT, ACT scores had some priority post-COVID. Many thousands of universities have gone test optional, so their importance has significantly declined. And our advice at this point would not be to prioritize those things. The messages we're hearing from universities is always that grades are more important. They have always been more important, and a test score will not make up for the other pieces of the application. Their essay is a wonderful opportunity for them to help bring their application to life, and that can be very, very important, especially at more selective schools. Their teacher recommendations, counselor recommendations, those are things out of their control. And then you see on the bottom half of that list, the extracurriculars, demonstrated interest at the few schools that do track that, class ranking when provided, but KIS doesn't do that, and then the other things, which we expect to fall off that list.
See, this is why we need to have names for who's doing what slide.
That was my idea.
Go to the next one. This is, I mean, again, for those of you who have been coming to a lot of these, who have met with us and been at KS for a while, you probably heard the same message for a long time. And it is about being purposeful, about being authentic, about being genuine, and about, it can be really, really hard to be a young person and compare yourself to everybody, and especially in this environment when there's so many amazing people. There's so many impressive students, of which your children are, but they have their own individual strengths. And so we really want to, again, lead with what makes them unique, what makes them special, what are their strengths, of which they all have them, and leaning on that and not letting all of the information that comes from their peers and from hogwans or advisors or the internet or former alumni and older siblings and younger siblings, and there's so much to take in, but it really does need to be about them. You know, who are they, and what are their strengths, and what is the best environment for them? Because the students who are able to align those pieces are the ones who do the best, not just in their acceptances, but just in the next step. Again, when we, if I use the alumni as examples, we had another student who really articulated it well, that he was like, to all the seniors, he said, you think this is going to be the defining moment, but then there's going to be another moment, and then there's another opportunity and another one, and it's just a series of opportunities, of which there's going to be some good decisions and some good outcomes, and there's going to be some disappointing ones, But then there's going to be another opportunity and another one. And he talked about several of his friends. This was a student who had just graduated from university, and thinking about some of his friends who had gone to the most prestigious universities who didn't seem like they were doing very well at this point. And then other students that, friends of his that had gone to, or people he'd met along the way who had gone to schools he'd never even heard of, who had done these incredible things and were really kind of flying through this next chapter of their life. And even at that point, the students who maybe weren't doing so well, that's not their entire story. And the students who had done really well in university, they still have to keep taking advantage of the opportunities. And so just again, allowing your children to breathe and relax, and remembering that there's going to be more opportunities after this, and to keep thinking about what's important to them and what is their long-term hopes and goals, and it's going to be okay. Okay, this goes into ties into this discussion about rankings, which is part of that, because that's part of this prestige and this idea that, this thing that somebody else has said is the best thing should be their own value system of what is the best. And, that's not to say that rankings can't be a useful part of how we make decisions, and they can't be a way to evaluate schools, but a ranking that you find on the internet at its core is somebody else saying what the value is. It's not your family, it's not your child, it isn't necessarily going to align with what is the most important thing for them. I'm going to keep using these kids because I thought they were amazing with all the things they said. Another young man who is currently at my alma mater, University of Washington, was talking about computer science, and that's the program that he's in. But he was saying even within that, machine learning is a real strength of the computer science program, but students who might want to go into game design or programming, that it's really pretty weak or pretty average. And so even being more specific about what it is that he wanted to learn and kind of tying that together is going to allow more opportunities down the road.
Can I?
Please jump in.
Actually, yesterday, two of my students came at different times to talk to me about the same thing, was their college list, and really debating about which prestigious schools they should be applying to. And when I asked them, why is it that you want to apply to these schools? And they were very honest, and they said the prestige. And I said to them, prestige is a legitimate reason for why you would like to apply to a school, absolutely. But now I wanted to ask them, okay, now you want the prestige, what else about that school is it that you are interested in? And it made me really think about, we consider so many things, like whether it's a car, for example, you like a prestigious car. Are you going to drive a Genesis or a BMW or a Porsche? You don't just go into the dealership and say, I'll take any one of those. You consider so many factors into why you would choose that particular prestigious brand. Do you want the SUV? Do you want the G70? Do you want the G80? And why do you want that? Because it's the size, does it fit you? Do you want the heated seats? All of these little things that you take into account even after you want something prestigious. I'm going to kind of continue. So I went shopping yesterday, and I was buying a gift for a friend, and I knew I wanted a prestigious gift, so I went to a Galleria in Suwon, the department store, and I could see Dior and Chanel and Balenciaga and all these prestigious brands, and I didn't just walk into there and say, okay, I want that, it's Dior, thank you, give me that. I went in and so I decided on Dior, and I knew I wanted a wallet, and they brought out so many wallets, but I know my friend likes black. So I said, okay, give me the black. So we got rid of the wallets that weren't black. And then I considered there's this matte leather, and then there's the shiny leather. Which one matches my friend more? And I was there for about 30 minutes or an hour, and then I left the store to think more. I asked her friends, which one is going to be the right one for her? And then I did some shopping, I ate some food, and then I went back. And then I said, okay, it's this one. But as you can see, that even for a wallet, that is prestigious. I've spent so much time to think about why I want that particular prestigious wallet and not the other 1,000 prestigious things in the store. And so that's what I want you to have these conversations with your students about is, yes, prestigious, that's fantastic. But now why are all these other things that are drawing you to that school? Because that's really going to make a difference in, one, their application and how the application comes off, but also them being happy at that school if they hopefully get there. Yeah.
That's a good analogy. I hadn't heard you say that one yet. That's good.
Well,
It just happened yesterday.
yeah, it happened yesterday. So
Well, the car thing,
Oh,
I think
okay,
that's good. I might steal that. So here's just a look, just kind of underline the point that we were talking about rankings, and just showing that like a lot of the different rankings, U.S. News being one that will come up with a Google search, and looking at the things that are going to be on there, right? Things, graduation rate, which that's a great one, right? Reputation about what? SAT scores, acceptance rate, student-faculty ratio, alumni giving. And there's so much of that they can manipulate because they know that if they can move up in the rankings, they can get more applications. But when we look on the right side, which I think are the things that we want for our children, right? The student happiness, the graduation satisfaction, the quality of the individual programs, the diversity, the opportunity to talk to professors, quality of specialized programs, all these things that will make such a huge impact. And they're almost never part of the rankings. The rankings are going to be the big top dollar, right? Alumni giving. Well, what do we care about that, right? If it leads to student happiness, great, but let's evaluate the student happiness, right? The acceptance rate. Well, why is that an important factor? If that's, again, a lot of this can be manipulated, and a lot of times is, for the sake of them running their business, not for the sake of your student. And so again, a lot of these things can be important, and prestige can be important, but really diving into what is specifically important to your family and your child is really going to help.
Many of the alums also mentioned climate and weather as a really big factor that I don't think a lot of our students think about unless they've been to those states before, those locations, or even just the area around them, right? Suburbs versus urban versus very rural areas, right? Some of these really prestigious universities might be in the middle of nowhere, right? They might not have the opportunities that the students are looking for themselves. So I thought that was also a really great factor that a lot of the alumni really hammered in many, many times to our students to kind of say, like, you should really think about it, because if you're used to a place that has sunshine all year round for the most part, when you're going to a place like Seattle or even New York where it gets really gloomy for a long period of time, like that's something to consider as well, right?
Again, a couple of more things. When we look at the U.S. News ranking, so we've got the weight of the peer assessment survey, which college presidents rate other colleges similar. And that's, again, factored in above things like student happiness and graduation satisfaction. And this Forbes one, which I always put in here because I think it's crazy, is a quarter of the ranking is student ratings of professors. Participation in the student rating is not monitored. Anybody can go on there and fill out that survey. So again, there's a lot about these rankings that can be very misleading and don't necessarily represent what is going to be important to you. So we just want to, again, kind of remind you to find your own kind of value system and talking through with that with your child. You can fly through the next things, I think, are headlines. Yeah, so this is just some of the things that have happened over the last year or two of the different universities and some of the issues that have come up with the rankings. I know there's been a big push as some of the universities have started to remove their data from the ranking systems. I expect that to continue and keep going. Yeah, you're just going to see a bunch of these.
So rankings are rankings. If you want to look at rankings, I think we're trying to encourage families to look at what rankings really means and what is your takeaway from that and how is that important to you. As high school counselors, we really want to encourage kids to think about a good fit or those match factors that we talked a lot about in the spring. So the things like the majors, the activities, the territory, which goes into the location that so many alumni talk about, the cost, and then the student help or support that's available to them. Those are the things that time after time, if you're choosing schools based on match factors, the things that you identify as being important to your student's success, that choosing a school that has those match factors will help to lead to their success. It's not that the rankings or the prestige is going to give them something that's going to miraculously make them successful. It's the match factors and how the students feel at the universities that help them find those opportunities and help them find ways to be successful and really make an impact later on. So Stanford did this study showing student learning, well-being, job satisfaction, and it was the actions of the students, so the choices or the decisions that the students get to make, those are the things that determined the students' futures or their outcomes, not the actual college that they went to. Like Ms. Ronnie had mentioned, students who had gone to really high-ranked schools who weren't doing very well in comparison to students who were going to schools that some kids had never heard of that were doing amazing things. It's not the school's name that's going to give you your future life. It's how you take advantage of the opportunities and seek out the opportunities that will help you find your way in the future. One of the ways that we talk about finding a good match or a good fit is looking at the academics. And this is going to come up very soon for you when your children are turning in their college lists. And then your child's counselor is going to have a look at that, and they are going to put in this rating system in Maya Learning. So we feel like it's important to have a look at that a little bit more. It does help us contextualize your student in comparison to the other kids from KIS who've had a similar education background, and help to determine the likelihood of their admission or their academic fit at that school. KIS uses 3 labels for those. We use likely, target, and reach. Sometimes our kids would like to use safety for the likely, but we use likely, target, and reaches. I don't know if we need to read through these. I feel like we've talked about this a lot, so very briefly, a likely for each student is where their grades and their test scores, if they're using them, are going to match with the previous 5 years of students from KIS who have applied to that school. And the acceptance rate from KIS is between 40 and 50%. A target is kind of somewhere in the middle. Their grades and their scores are close, and the acceptance rate is 26% or higher. And a reach school is one of a couple of different things. First, if the grades or the scores do not match the average, or if the acceptance rate is below 25%. It is important to note that there are many schools out there that are reaches for every single student. Regardless of their test scores and regardless of their grades, it is a reach because, for example, a 4% admission rate is not very likely for anyone, even the most amazing children of yours. It just doesn't make it very likely.
I do want to say that these labels feel harsh.
Yeah. We don't like this.
We have these conversations with students, and it always feels like we're the bad guy and saying you're not going to get in, and that's not the intention. The intention is the education piece and being realistic. You know, it's good to be optimistic. It's good to have dreams and goals and hopes, and we don't want to say not to, but we want to be grounded in data. It's just a better way to make decisions. It's an informed way of making decisions. And then if you do choose to apply to more reach schools than more likely schools, well, you know you're going to get into fewer schools. That's what the math shows us. And I know every time we have this conversation, I feel bad, but it's good to try to remove some of the emotion and just look at the data, because it will help set expectations. And a lot of the times the way a young person will react is based on expectations, right? If they expect X and that doesn't happen, they're upset. But if they think, Y might be great, and then Y happens, then everything's good. And so trying to, again, as parents, to reframe those and help set really good expectations will help manage those inevitable ups and downs that are going to happen through the course of this process.
I also think that the three of us always like to emphasize that a likely school doesn't mean it's a bad school, or it doesn't mean that it's any less than a reach school, right? A likely school could actually be, in fact, the best fit for your student, potentially, right? Same as a reach school or a target school. And so I think the students in their head think like a likely school should be like my backup, right? Or it's not such a great option. But I always emphasize, like, look, you might only get into your likely or target schools, right? So make sure that when you're making that list, or when you're supporting your student with that list, that they can see themselves at any of the schools that they apply to, regardless of likely, safe, or target or reach, right?
These are some screenshots from Maya Learning, and I hope that you have all accessed Maya Learning to look at these data points for your children. If you haven't and you're unsure how to do that, please connect this week even with your child's counselor, or Miss Una is also able to help you. There's a lot of information in here that is meant to help your child build a well-balanced list where they're going to get the outcomes that you're really hoping for. This is a screenshot of the Compare All tab, and this is just a really quick view of the average GPA and test scores from kids from KS who have applied and gotten in. And it just gives you a quick visual. Green means your child's statistics are higher than the average. Red means they are lower than the average. And I think black or gray means that there's not enough data. So that's a really good quick visual, and it should be just one piece of helping you put that list together. The other that is, I think, more helpful, this one too. Under historical statistics, you can see here, this is where you would find that percent accepted for that 5-year range. And I think that will help you figure out, again, building that balanced list and helping you determine if it's a likely target or a reach. The scattergrams are also really helpful. This is a great scattergram of a school that is quite likely for the student. I believe, I can't really tell very clearly,
It's
but
that diamond,
I
yeah.
think this is the student. This is our fake student here. And so when I look at this scattergram, the student looks to be above the average in their test scores and their GPA, and you can see the acceptance rate of this school is very healthy. And the student in question here in this diamond is surrounded by the other green dots. When I look at that, I feel pretty confident that that child would be accepted at that university. There's always exceptions, right? You see a couple of interesting red dots here that are in the mix as well, and a couple of green dots kind of as outliers here. So there's always exceptions. But when you're building a list, you want to have a wide variety. In contrast, this next scattergram is one where I don't feel very good about the child's possibility of being admitted. First, you can see that their statistics are lower than the average, but also I wouldn't feel really good about this scattergram for any student. This is an example of one of those reach schools that would be a reach school for everyone who's applying to this school. So as you're helping your child put together that list, having a wide variety of scattergrams would be our general recommendation. You should have a few of these schools where, yes, this school is a great match and your student really wants to attend, and you should have some of the other where that school is also a really great match for your child, and it is much more likely that they'll get acceptance.
Yeah, college visits. Throughout the year, we have a large number of universities actually come to KIS, and that list increases pretty much every week.
Maybe
And-
every day right now.
Yeah, and so many come here, and I hear students, and I know the other counselors say this, students will say, oh, I heard that this, or I got told that this. And these universities that come to KS they have all the information our students would really ever need, and yet they don't utilize this resource as much as I believe they should, because they can really ask these people who know everything, the most up-to-date information, directly what they need to know or what they want to find out. Oftentimes, the college reps that come to KIS are going to be the same people reading our students' applications. So this is a really great way to say, hi, I am. Nice to meet you. I've got these questions. And when that rep reads that letter, it's like, oh, I remember that young man or young girl with that beaming smile. And they're going to read the application. So really encourage your children and students to come to these college rep visits, because they can really get the best information by asking questions. Even if they're not necessarily planning to attend that school, they can still ask some really valuable questions. And so the college list dates can be found on Maya Learning under events. And so check in with your child. Oh, there's this college visit going on this week. Have you gone to it? Or, oh, you should really go check that out.
Especially if they haven't been to that state before and they don't know much about the area around there, or even if it's like they're not planning to apply to that particular college, but that college is in the same area or in a similar country as another school that they're looking into as well.
I was just going to say, this is a really great way for parents to support their students. Students will sometimes forget to look at this list, but parents, if you could look at it every few days and find some that your child might be interested in, and I would even go so far as to say, maybe send them a text message at 10:40, at 10:40, and say, hey, remember, Boston University is going to be in the College Center today. Are you going to go to that visit? That would be a really helpful thing. Also on this list, sometimes universities will be able to travel to Korea, but not be able to travel to all of the international schools. So they will often host one information session, and it's usually more centrally located in Seoul. So, for example, I believe UChicago is coming on September 3rd. They're going to be at SFS on that Sunday, and that's the only place that they're going to be. They're not going to travel around. So we do also post those visits that you would be able to help your child go to some of those visits if you like. A really big one coming up is September 16th, if you mark your calendars. It's called the Seoul World University Fair, and there will be over 100 universities at Dwight on that Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. But this is something really easy that parents can help their kids with, help them with this research process.
So just a reminder, as we look at deadlines, again, I know you've seen some of this information before, and the students are probably very, very familiar. But as we think through, just so common language, regular decision is any deadline that a university either just has the one deadline. So the University of California, for example, has the one deadline on November 30th for all their universities. Many universities might offer multiple deadlines for different kind of periods, and the kind of last one, the typical one, is usually in January, which would be a regular decision deadline. When we think about early decision, that is for universities that have a binding option. What that means is that if you choose to apply there, you are saying that if I'm accepted, I will enroll and I will withdraw the rest of my applications. This is really important that students realize this is because they know they will go there no matter what. and not because they think it's going to be that silver bullet that's going to help them get into that reach schools. Every university rep will always say that if you weren't going to get in regular, you weren't going to get in early either. That if you're not a good fit, you're not a good fit. The early decision is just really additional information for universities to be able to understand that this student is really, really committed and can be great for your student, because that's often the first results of the year, or all the early decision results. And so if they know that there's a place that they feel is perfect for them, and they'd be thrilled and they're ready to be done with their applications, that can be a really good opportunity. Early action is different, and that is just an earlier opportunity. So that is for the students who feel that by November that they are ready to provide the best version of an application. They can show the best version of themselves, their grades, their essays, any sort of activities that they're ready to be kind of evaluated at that point. And it is not binding, but it does give them usually a decision sooner. And the sooner they hear that first yes, the happier everybody will be. So we certainly encourage students, again, if they feel that that deadline is the best version of what their application is going to look like, that's a great, they'd be recommended. But again, not to follow their friends or because they just really want to hear back sooner. If they need the additional time because they want to continue to show better grades, because they need to work more on their essays, because that is totally fine. And again, we want them to choose what is going to help them the best. And then this last one, which is only for a couple of universities often, is this restrictive early action. So that is, again, the an earlier deadline for some universities. It's almost always at very, very selective universities. It is non-binding, but they will have restrictions, hence the name. Often that is, they restrict where else a student can apply early. They usually won't allow students to apply early decision. They usually will not allow them to apply early to a lot of other private schools. Each university will have their own rules and expectations for that. So again, just understanding the language and what those options are.
Your students met with us at the beginning of this week? It feels like 4 years ago. The beginning of this week, and they got these pieces of paper. I hope that they brought them home and you guys have had discussions. So the copy that you have in your hand, that Ms. Una handed out, we just wanted to spend a few minutes to make sure that your students took a chance to review that with you. So if you want to start, how do I?
I think you gotta go to the Zoom, that guy.
If you want to have a look at the paper copy in hand, because it's probably a lot easier to read than this one up here. These are KIS's policies and practices around university application. And there's a place for you to sign on a couple of these pages. So we really want to make sure that you're clear on what the policy and practice is, and if you have any questions, let's talk about it before you sign it and we get too far into this. The first, and maybe the most important, is our reminder that honesty and integrity is an integral part of the college application process. It's very important for us at KIS to uphold that honesty and integrity, and also to talk to you about the high level that your university is also going to expect honesty and integrity. And that includes every single piece of your application your child's application being completely completed by them, as well as every piece of the application being truthful. And universities have many different ways to follow up on that and check on that, and many different consequences or actions that they would take if those things were found to be not honest.
I just want to say, I think this year in particular with AI, large language models, ChatGPT, those sorts of things, University admissions officers read thousands and thousands and thousands of these applications, and they're going to read a lot of different pieces. The application's going to be 25, 30, 35 pages. They have a pretty good detector, right? Just their kind of gut feeling. And so in the past, the issue was students submitting usually essays that weren't their own or had been significantly helped by somebody else. And the reps will say, this doesn't feel like a high school wrote this, or it doesn't feel like this particular person wrote this. And the same thing's going to be true with AI and the chat GPTs. And not that they shouldn't be getting help from their English teachers, from advisors, from you as parents, using things like chat GPT as tools, but just remembering that it's really, really important that it's in their own voice, that it is their story that they're telling, that it is their application. Because if a university rep thinks that it isn't, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to take the time to contact us, to contact the school to follow up, or they're just going to move on and they're going to say, I don't feel good about this. And they're going to move on to the other applicants. And so I know it can feel, right, there's this pressure, I want to write the perfect essay and the perfect application, but it's really important that it's an authentic application, that it's a genuine application, that they're being true to themselves, and again, remembering all the great things about themselves that will stand out in their application.
So the second point on your paper talks about early decision obligation. I feel like Ronnie already covered that, but if you are applying early decision, you as parents will have a requirement to sign the agreement that you understand that university's requirements and the obligations if your child is accepted. Your student also signs a similar understanding, and your high school counselor also signs that we have talked about the early decision obligation. So again, if you are applying early decision and you are accepted, your university does expect you to attend. Your third point on your paper has to do with maximum number of applications. KIS does have a limit of 10 applications worldwide. That includes everywhere that they apply, every country they apply, so a total of 10. Sometimes families do feel like their situation is an exception to that, so we do allow for students to appeal for an additional 2. So the maximum number of universities that KIS would support is 12 universities. I do want to also share that our average for the past 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years has been between 7 and 9 applications per student. So I know sometimes when we're faced with a limit, that feels like, oh, I don't want that limit. I just want to do whatever I want to do. And I do really want to encourage you to think about why the limit exists, and that is primarily to support the quality of your child's application. It seems really easy when we're not the ones doing the work, but it seems really easy. Well, yeah, my kid can do 20 applications, 30 applications, no problem. My kid's amazing. But when we really dig into these applications and the essays that are being required and the quality that is expected in order to get a positive admission, it really becomes a different amount of time. I've had many, many parents tell me in December, oh, in September, I thought, what? I want more than 10. And by December, the parent is saying, I understand now. I understand 10 is a lot. And you don't really understand it until you go through it. So please do remember the reason for this.
Not only the parent, though,
Yeah.
the student.
Well, yes.
I've had students come to me and be like, Mr. Samuels, I got nothing left. I'm out of creative ideas and juice. I can't do another essay by that December.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
One question that I often ask students is to tell me what order these universities are. And they say, well, this is the top school. I'm like, okay, if you don't get into that, what's the next school you're hoping for? It's this one. And by the time I get to 7 or 8, I'm like, so how would you feel if you got into that school? And for many of them, if they're honest, they go, eh. And it's like, well, why is it on the list, right? And I think it's really they're just trying to fill the space. But the question then comes, well, if you didn't spend any time on these 2, 3, 4 schools that you don't really want to go to. How is that going to improve the other 6, 7, 8? I don't know about the other counselors, but all of the times in my career when I've had a student who has turned in a list and they've got 5 schools, they've got 7 schools, and it's like, and they know exactly where they want to apply and why, and I immediately go, oh, it's going to be a piece of cake. They've done all that they need to do. They're not just filling space. And again, that doesn't mean that your child might not have 10 or 12 schools that they're dreaming to go to, but having the conversation and really thinking through, and that, again, more isn't better. The right amount is going to be what's going to lead to the best results.
Our next point says document submission, and that has to do with just the process. KIS will send your child's documents, which means their transcripts, there's letters of recommendation, their school records, profiles, those kinds of things, after your child has applied to that college. And we're going to talk about in a little bit on the schedule. But we encourage your kids to apply 10 school days before the university's deadline for a bunch of different reasons, but mainly it's to help them working ahead and to have us as the resource during that time. There are other things that happen, say on October 31st, which is the day before the November 1st deadline. Infamously, Common App crashes. And if Common App crashes and kids are like, oh, what do I do? How am I going to get my application done? I have to tell you that when that does happen, our students tend to be like, what? Common App crashed? We didn't even know, because they already did them. So it is to help prepare kids, save them from themselves and their procrastination, right? But also so that they can get the support from us. We are here, and our primary responsibility and our time is spent this fall helping your children get their applications to a really high quality that they feel really good about, and again will increase their chances of being admitted. But we cannot do that for all of your children the day before the November 1st deadline. It's really difficult. So working ahead of time is always going to help produce our highest quality work. For letters of recommendation, KIS does provide 2 teacher letters of recommendation plus a counselor letter of recommendation for the students who need those. There are some students who choose universities who don't need those, but if your child needs 1 or 2 letters of recommendation, we do help them coordinate that. That process happened mainly in the spring. There are a few new students, and maybe, I don't know if you guys have any students who are still choosing 12th grade teachers? Mm-hmm. Yeah? For the most part, that is all worked out. We do provide 2. That is what the universities are looking for. Universities are not looking for more of the same. We do encourage your students to choose those 2 teachers to represent their best student self that they have been at KIS and who can speak to their curiosities, their motivations, their growth. And I've read dozens and dozens of letters at KIS, and they're incredible. Our teachers do a really great job of focusing in on the students that they're writing letters for and really pulling out a lot of detail from how they are in class and how they're using that information. And this limit of 2 does go through the whole process of applications. Sometimes when students get waitlisted or even deferred, that sense of panic comes up and they think, oh, I've got to give more information. But we really encourage students to take a deep breath, look at what the universities are looking for, and universities are not looking for more outstanding letters of recommendation that would say the same thing. Oftentimes, the wait list and deferral has more to do with numbers and moving kids around and seeing how things play out than it does with more letters of recommendation. So 2 is the limit through this whole process. The next page is a copy for you of all of the wording about helping your child understand the likely, target, and reach categories. And then the next page has to do with the dates and kind of the little details about that. I always encourage families, honestly, to put this little chart on your refrigerator. The 10 days ahead really is encouraged for your child to help reduce their panic. Reducing their panic and their procrastination really does promote a higher quality application. So these deadlines are the very, very strong recommendation. And then you're going to sign the bottom of this one. And that is paired with the college list, which is a little bit less nuanced. Your children are going to turn that into us September 15th. There are 2 required likelies. Go here in slot 1 and slot 2. And then the rest of them as they see fit. You can see slot 11 and 12. That's if there's an appeal request, they would write those university names there. This list, like Ronnie said, there is potential to change it. It is not, turning this in on September 15th does not mean that your child has to apply to all of the schools on their list. They could have 12 and decide, you know what, 6 is really a better number for me. Or I need to switch out this school and add this other school. I went to a university visit and realized that this other school is a much better match for me. There is flexibility in it. We are going to encourage your children to think through those decisions and make sure they're not being made from panic. But it is flexible. And then also at the bottom of that, we're going to ask you to sign that as well when your child turns that in to us. If you have questions about those, any piece of that, please let us know. College is expensive. I hope that you're also using Maya Learning to look at the costs, and I hope that you're understanding all of the costs that go into the annual fee. There's the tuition, room and board, extra fees. If you want some help looking through those things, please connect with your counselor. It's a really important in your decision making. And no one really is super excited to write those tuition checks. Scholarship and financial aid is very appealing. Everybody's situation is different. The things that are listed here, they really depend. For example, FAFSA is for US citizens, and the CSS profile. Your universities are going to ask for some form of income verification, whether that is for supporting your child's student visa, or if it has to do with scholarship and financial aid. If you are wondering what your options are, please connect with your counselor. We don't usually talk a lot about it at group things because everybody's situation is very, very different. But if you have more questions about it, please connect with your child's counselor.
So all of our roles are going to be very different, but we're all kind of working through this together. So as your counselor, we're going to be, like we mentioned, managing all those documents that are going to be sent. We're going to be maintaining those records and information, supporting you and your student through the overall process, reminding of deadlines in conjunction with you as parents as well. Providing updates of information, just such as the college visits, for example, collecting those letters of recommendation, and then helping the students just put together their application. So that's kind of our role as your student's counselor. As a student, of course, their responsibilities will be attending those rep visits, working on their application, doing that research, proofreading their transcript, taking the appropriate tests and things like that, like the SAT and their AP exams, sending their scores. So the students are responsible for sending their official test scores, SAT and AP, once they know where they're going to be attending school. Obviously responding to emails. I think if you can also stress that to them, I feel like we keep telling them over and over again, but it would help from your end to help them check their emails. Keeping a record of all of their applications. I know each of our students have their own ways of keeping track of their applications. Some might have an Excel sheet, some might write it down, some might just like have it in their head, but somehow, some way. updating their Maya learning account. So right now, all of the students should have once they have their final list kind of decided, all of those universities should be in their considering list on Maya Learning. I know I've talked to some and their list isn't updated yet, so that's one of their other pieces. And deadlines. So they're the main person responsible for their deadlines to know when things are coming up. We'll do our best to remind them, but it is their responsibility at the end of the day as well. As a parent, I think we've talked a lot about this today, just really supporting them in that process, helping them find a balance through this process, I think, reminding them to take breaks, reminding them to go to sleep, to put their devices away, helping them to gather information. They might need some support in finding little pieces of information or research about the schools. Even just doing like virtual college tours with them, I think is really helpful if they can't go physically to the campus. Assisting them in managing those deadlines. Of course, they're going to be very overwhelmed, and so I think you as kind of like helping them to ground them around those deadlines can really help them. Any kind of documentation, especially for financial aid and things like that, and helping that piece of the puzzle be put together. And yeah, just overall being, just always constantly reminding your students that they will be okay. I remember last year, one of my students mentioned dreading dinner time because their parents would bring up college around that time or asking them about college applications, and they're like, I don't want to talk about college applications during dinner time. So maybe like connecting with your students and saying like, let's set a time that's not, in one of these areas where you just want to relax so that we can have that conversation going and you can be informed.
Just a quick kind of refresher, thinking towards the decisions that are going to happen. This will happen starting in December, moving on through the second semester. And so these are the 5 options that a student might hear, admit, obviously being the one we're hoping for. And so if it was an early decision, then they would be completely done. But otherwise, for all the other ones, usually that will be included in there will be some of that financial aid scholarship information. And so giving you some more information to kind of evaluate before you make a decision. For most of the U.S. universities, the decision for you to choose to enroll isn't going to happen until May 1st. So you usually have a little bit of time. Defer is what is a possibility for early deadlines. So that's for early decision, early action, restrictive early action. Sometimes students will get deferred to the next deadline. And so there's most of the time nothing they need to do. If there is, the university will ask at that time. But for the most part, the university has just said, we want to wait and see. It could be that they want to see how the student does for the first semester with their grades. Oftentimes, the university is just not aware yet of what their class is kind of going to shape up to be. And so they are giving themselves more time before they make their decision. Deny, obviously not hoping for this, but when a student's denied, just a reminder that there is no appeal to the universities. Sometimes we get the question, well, if I get denied it early, can I then apply regular? And the answer is no. So you can apply to the school once, and if they decide that the student is not a good fit, then that's the result. Waitlist, that is something that will happen with the regular decisions, and so that is the university essentially saying that we think the student could be a good fit, we just don't know yet if we have enough space. So all the universities are operating under their own kind of mathematical formula of trying to figure out, well, if we accept 10,000 students, we are hoping that 4,000 are going to attend because most of the students will get accepted from multiple schools and before they actually make a decision. So oftentimes they use the wait list as a way of saying, well, we're going to wait and see because maybe we only get 3,800 and then we need to add a couple hundred more people to fill those seats. Again, with a wait list, if, I don't know, we're talking way down the road and some of these questions will come up later in the year, but if a university asks for something, then they will want to provide that. But oftentimes they're saying, we've we understand who you are, and we think you are a good fit, and it really is just about the space. And then rescind. Rescind is something that doesn't happen very often, but is really kind of a reminder to students to kind of finish the year strong. And so that while getting accepted is great, no acceptance is guaranteed admissions no matter what. And so how they finish the year, both from their academic side but also behavior side, is going to be important. Not that we have any concerns about your children.
We have some students talking about senioritis already, and they talk about it like it's COVID. Oh, I've got senioritis, like they've caught it from something. This is just an encouragement that universities expect students to finish the year the same way that allowed them to get accepted. You know, they want them to, that what allowed them to get accepted at school, they really want the students to finish like that. And it's so much worse to have tasted something and to have something in your hand and then for that to be taken away. So just as the year goes on, just continue to encourage your student and your child to just keep trying hard and working hard and maintaining that momentum that has allowed them to be so successful at KIS so far.
Senior year is stressful. This whole process can be stressful. It can bring about a lot of fear and worry and insecure and inadequacy, and it can just be a lot on a young person. And so it's really, really important that we help them navigate that, both by modeling the kind of behaviors that we want to see, but also trying to remind them of all of the things that we know that can help them. You as parents have such insight to, you know, when they're feeling overwhelmed or when they're feeling stressed, or when you ask a question and you get a really short answer and you know they've had a rough day. This is a place where you can make a world of difference, because there's a lot of time that they spend that's not at school. And that's often the times that they're most vulnerable and most honest. And I know that as parents, you're often the punching bag sometimes for that, which is a thankless job, but it is the place where you can really help them to navigate this, because it is a really challenging year. It's exciting, but there is a lot of ups and downs. And so we've got a little chart here of different kind of things to be thinking about physical self-care. A lot of these I want to kind of really emphasize. The beginning of the year is where we can kind of set some of these habits and start to create some of these strategies and make sure that we're being very proactive. Hey, Una, can you go shut the doors? I think everyone's going to lunch. Thank you. And this is, the more proactive they are at the beginning, the kind of easier it'll be for them to navigate when they're starting to feel worn down, feeling tired, feeling stressed. And so thinking about exercise and the walks that they're able to go on, thinking about, are they making time for friends and family and still doing a lot of those things? Sometimes, you know, I hear seniors talk a lot about, oh, I don't have time for friends, or I've really had to pull away. And, you know, it is important to make decisions about how we spend our time. And there is going to, you know, they do have a lot on their plate, but still finding joy, still having stress relief, having outlets, having breaks, and remembering that they still need sleep and they still need relationships. And again, this is a whole host of different things that you can do. And also for you as parents, this is kind of a terrifying year as they're about to leave home. And so taking advantage of that and spending more time with them. And while we do want you to have conversations around college, as Sana had mentioned, having conversations that are not about college as well. Still talking about all the other things in their life can be a really, really nice way to spend time.
I also want to point out that it is also potentially stressful and very, very emotional for you as well. And sometimes, you know, if there's multiple people in a household that are stressed and emotional, sometimes that just sort of like becomes this cyclone of bad feelings. So really taking the time to check in with yourself, to see how you're feeling, where your stress is coming from, and making sure to take care of that and not adding it to your child's stress because they're so sensitive right now. Very, very sensitive, and they're picking up on your feelings and your emotions. So making sure that you're in a good place to best be able to support them through this. Because this is really their time to put themselves out in this application, and how exciting. It's not our time as parents or other adults working with them to put our own feelings and stressors on them, if that makes sense. This is really a time as a parent to come together and help alleviate their stress and support them through this process and not make it more stressful. So do take time to check in with yourself. How are you doing? Do you need to do some physical self-care today or emotional self-care so that when your child comes home from school and tosses their backpack in a certain way that you know is not good, that you are able to be there as a supportive reaction and a supportive person rather than entering that situation in a bad place yourself.
Find reasons to celebrate. Little things. The first time they submit an application, I mean, we don't know if they're going to get accepted or not, but celebrate it, because it's easy in this environment to take for granted that, you know, everybody here is applying to college and everybody here is going to go to college, but that's not the case the world over. And that application is this kind of monument to all of the hard work that they put in and all of those hours and all the ups and downs, and those are really important milestones. And it's easy to just think about the end result, but this process is still, there's a lot of joy that can come out of it.
I think we're going to leave this one. We're going to send this out. You guys can take a picture. There's a little to-do list that we've already talked about these things, but this is just all in a nice little place here for you.
Again, take a photo. These are things that we've been talking about now for an hour. It's really just helping them navigate this process, reminding them of deadlines, being that support system for them. That's good. We do have lots of things coming up. So next week when we have back to school night, we're going to do a presentation which is never super popular, but I think incredibly important. We're going to look at sleep and devices. And, you know, we have some data about students, and I think it's really interesting, and especially as we're setting those good habits for the year, this is a place where a parent can make a big difference. We've got the Art Institute of Chicago coming on the 1st. They're going to do a parent presentation on
Portfolios, preparing, like if your child is thinking about going to an art school, what that could look like.
the next week. We've got a grade 12 parent coffee on the 7th, then the Seoul World University Fair on the 17th. We've got another grade 12 parent coffee. Again, just opportunities for you to check in, ask some questions, talk to other grade 12 parents. We've got a university coming in to do a parent presentation on architecture as a major. So if you're interested to hear specifically about architecture and what they're kind of looking for and some of the opportunities that students in those degree in those fields have. We will do our mock admissions for parents workshop again on October 19th. And then on the 31st, we have a university who's going to talk specifically about filling out the activity section of the Common App. As we get more of these kind of dates and activities and workshops and presentations, we'll continue to add them to the calendar, and we will share this out with parents. But lots of information, and as always, if you have specific questions, please reach out individually to your child's counselor.
Yes, thank you. This one right here,
That's my fault.
the Seoul World University Fair is September 16th on Saturday. Yeah, thank you.
Shoot. I did that. And that's it. Just an hour and 20. These always go so much longer than I expect them to. We do appreciate your time. We know you guys have lots of things to do. So thank you. Please reach out to us, and then we'll be up here if you have some questions for us. We will see you guys all soon.